Today at its Unpacked event, Samsung announced its latest flagship foldable in the new Galaxy Z Fold 5. Now, while I wasn't able to attend the event myself in Seoul, South Korea, we were able to get some hands-on time with it ahead of its launch later this summer. So let's see what Samsung's cooking up with the 5th generation of its big foldable phone. Now, the big changes for 2023 are that the Z Fold 5 is now sleeker, a little bit more compact, has an even brighter screen, and Samsung has finally been able to get rid of that gap between the halves of the phone when it's closed, which is a really nice but small change. On top of that, Samsung added some new multitasking features and gestures, so you're increasing the productivity and the power usability of the phone even more. Now, as you can see, the overall design of the phone hasn't changed that much. You still get a skinny baton-like shape with a 6.2-inch OLED cover screen, along with that big 7.6-inch main screen on the inside, both of which support 120Hz refresh rates. In terms of dimensions, though, it is a bit slimmer at around 15 millimeters and change when closed. Though, that said, that's still a bit thicker than something like the Pixel Fold, which is more like 12.1 millimeters. So even though it is a bit slimmer, it's still not quite the thinnest big foldable on the market. There's also a new hinge, which Samsung is calling its Flex Hinge, and it has a more simplified design while still delivering full IPX8 water resistance, so you don't have to fear from any spills or even accidental submergence, which is really nice for everyday usability. Meanwhile, on the inside, Samsung is going with Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 mobile platform for Galaxy, which is a really annoying mouthful of a name for a chip for its processor. Now, that said, the battery size is staying pat at 4,400 milliamp hours, so any gains in battery life are going to come from improved power efficiency instead of increased overall capacity. Then around back, we're looking at basically the same camera hardware, which includes a 50 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 10 megapixel telephoto camera with that same 3x optical zoom. Now, Samsung says there have been some processing tweaks that are enabled by that new chip, but in terms of hardware, we're pretty much looking at the same sensors as we had on last year's phone. Now, moving back to that main screen, Samsung has increased the brightness even further so that it's the same as what you get on something like the Galaxy S23 Ultra at 1750 nits, which is really impressive, especially for a flexible display. Now, unfortunately, there is still a crease. Yes, it's there, and you can still feel it, and it's really close, but I would say it's slightly more noticeable than the Pixel Fold, but honestly, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Now, for someone like me who's been using a foldable phone for a long time, I don't really think the crease is that big of an issue. That said, if you think the crease is a deal breaker, you're probably still not going to get on board with this generation of Z Fold. Now, as for multitasking, Samsung has come up with a few new gestures to make that productivity on the phone a little bit easier. Now, first is there's a 2-finger swipe over from the left or the right, and that launches you straight into side-by-side multitasking mode, so it's even easier to get 2 apps running at the same time. There's also a new gesture for launching windowed apps, which is just a swipe down diagonally from the corner of the device, and that makes it easy to resize stuff, and you can still get that toolbar so you can launch it back into full windowed mode or go right into split screen mode from there. Really simple, really handy, and just nice overall improvements to multitasking. One interesting thing, and it still feels a little bit clunky, is that you can even drag and drop files and photos from one app to another without being in multi-window mode. You can do this by tapping and holding on something like a photo, and then using your other finger to tap the taskbar down below. You can then launch a different app while still holding it, mind you, and then you can drag it into something like Samsung Notes or email or whatever. Like I said, it is a little bit clunky, but it reminds me of that whole Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste on a desktop, which I kind of appreciate. That said, I think Samsung may be able to streamline that gesture a little bit in the future, because right now it sort of feels like playing Twister with your fingers between dragging and dropping different apps on different places of the phone. But I like where Samsung is going with this feature, especially when in terms of really supporting multitasking and productivity on a bigger device like this. And finally, while the test bar itself is pretty much the same as before, Samsung has increased the number of recent apps that you can see at the same time from 2 to 4, which is just a general improvement that anyone can get down with. Now, typically, we don't spend a ton of time talking about accessories. However, Samsung has made a new S Pen for the Z Fold 5, which is about 40% slimmer than before. And there's also a new case that works with the S Pen, and it's just generally a lot better designed, and it's a lot sleeker and more compact than before. And so even for someone like me who kind of hates cases, I would maybe consider using this because unfortunately there's still no room for the pen inside the phone itself. So if you want to carry it around, you are going to have to go with that case. Lastly, when it comes to colors, there's a really nice new icy blue color along with your standard phantom black and a cream option. There are also a couple exclusive colors available on Samsung.com, but we weren't able to see those today. All right, so now that I've had a chance to use the phone for a little bit, while I like a lot of the changes in a vacuum, my one concern is that for Samsung, who has had such a huge head start in the foldable market compared to other companies, it feels like Samsung isn't pressing their advantage as much as they should be. I mean, think about it. Samsung is 5 generations in. Meanwhile, on the Pixel Fold, which is Google's first foldable phone, we're getting an interesting new design that's even thinner than the Z Fold 5, plus a longer 5x optical zoom, not to mention Google's just generally better photo processing. And then when you look at some of Samsung's Chinese rivals, they're doing an even better job of hiding or eliminating that crease. So what gives? Perhaps more importantly, the Z Fold 5 is still slated to start at $1,800. That's a lot of money, and I just don't really get it. Even if you look at Samsung's own portfolio, back when the Z Flip first launched, it started at just under $1,500. But now you can get it at around $1,000, which is a pretty big price decrease. But when you look at the Z Fold line, originally it launched at just under $2,000, and the price has come down a little bit to $1,800, but not nearly as much as you see on the Z Flip line. And I think that's going to be a real big issue because the biggest barrier to entry for a big foldable phone is price. You really imagine with a company that's as big as Samsung is, that they can leverage, economies of scale to bring that price down a little bit. And I think if we're talking about a phone that's closer to $1,500, which is, yes, still really expensive, but even then, it'd be a lot more approachable to way more people. On top of that, it'd also be a significant leg up on rivals like the Pixel Fold, which is also $1,800. And I think that's a little bit of a shame because I really want to see the prices of these sorts of devices come down so more people can try them. And this is coming from someone who's been using a very expensive foldable phone for the last 4 years, and I want more people to be able to experience what I really like about phones like this. So in the end, while I like that added sleekness, getting rid of the gap, that brighter main screen, and all those multitasking enhancements, as I'm standing here now, I really have to wonder, is what Samsung doing on this generation really enough? So is this enough for you to get excited about the new Z Fold 5? Let me know in the comments down below. And for more news, videos, and hands-ons, stay tuned to Engadget for more.